the education wing was also a boiler room. So we got rid of both of those, made it one united system that's hot water, and that has supported us now for the last, it's been in for about 5 years now, 5, 6 years. So redid the whole HVA system with better controls, better systems. The whole fellowship hall literally used to borrow all of its HVAC off of the sanctuary. And so you couldn't do both. You had to choose where you were putting your cooling. And so things like that. So we updated the whole system with HVAC. We improved our staff offices. I left some symbols. The check mark means we've got it done. The little, I don't know what kind of symbol that is you would call it, but we did part of it. So we improved the main office downstairs and gave it a facelift and improved that. But one of the goals we had was to have a unified office. So we have essentially 2 offices right now, a downstairs office and an upstairs office where music, youth, and counseling with small groups with Sue Swing's education office. So we'd like to eventually, that's essentially the 3rd phase, have a unified office. And the idea was, we haven't done any work on what this will actually look like, but the idea was to continue this whole space off the end here and add 3 more offices essentially going down that way and make it more unified. We have not done that, but we did improve the offices. How many of you remember the old kitchen? We've got the old guard here today, right? We remember the old kitchen, and we converted that into partial conference room, which gave us another meeting space, but also half of it became the workroom. The secretaries and all of us that wanted to make copies and larger amounts of copies used to have to go way back into the corner of the building over here to do that, where we had our copier room. And so now it's literally in the office space, separate, so it helps with noise, but it's made a much better space and much closer to go get paper and things like that. So Sonia remembers all those treks she used to have to make down to go get paper.
It was because of Pastor Margaret that had to move back there.
That's right. When Margaret came, the 3rd office downstairs used to be the copier office. When we added Pastor Margaret as our 3rd pastor, that became a pastor's office. So we accomplished part of that goal, but that's the 3rd phase, which would essentially be, I would guess, 15 to 20 years from now, would be doing this out here. That's a major piece to add. Kitchen modernization. If you remember the old kitchen, I don't know if anybody knows this, but we really had not cleaned the grease traps in about 20 years. And so when we redid that work, the guy that came in to do the grease trap cleaning, that was an interesting thing to watch. As he's sucking out this horrible stuff, eating a sandwich. I'll never forget that guy. I'm like, do you not smell this? He's sitting there with a vacuum in one hand and a sandwich in the other. So when you get used to your work, it's just what it is, right? So anyway, we've updated the kitchen, and I think we'd all agree that we have just a beautiful kitchen now. We did have to give up the really old preschool room that was the original church nursery. We tried to capture the mural that had been created there a long time ago, and we took pictures of that. That mural is now in picture form on the walls of the 3-year-old room just opposite the nursery, if you ever want to still go see it. But makes me always think of Lois Weber, and I was just having a conversation about her the other day with someone says, you're Lois Weber's church. And I said, yes, we are. So, but I get to host a lot of synod groups, a lot of groups that come in to use our space. We're not only do we have a beautiful building that works great for lots of different meetings that synod likes to host, but we're also very central. So for Sheboygan to meet with Oconomowoc and Racine, we're right in the middle. So there's a lot of groups that like to use our space in that regards, which really works well. And whenever they come in to that kitchen, they're always like, whoa, you have a kitchen. This is a church kitchen. So even we hosted the Micah dinner the other night, and when they came in, I think it's called Skyline Catering. I forget the name of the group, but they came in and they're like, this is awesome. You know, they were just really excited to have, because usually they work from a sink. is kind of what most churches give them. So it's been a great addition there. I'm always amazed when I do additions, though, and then you live in it for a while. You always go, yeah, wish I'd done that. The one thing I would have added was the doors that swing both ways. That would have been nice, because we're constantly going only one way, and then it's kind of... But we've given more flow in a couple different passageways, so you can kind of go out and move around in different ways. So that's been really nice. We talked about adding additional education space. Back before this renovation, we were always in that place of, okay, how are we going to get these groups in here? I remember we had so many conversations on staff about, okay, we're going to have to put a group just, in a corner. And now we're at that place where I feel like we've pretty much got about what we need. It's worked out really well. So adding the conference room, adding the 8th grade Sunday school room, which is at the end of the new kitchen, that's given us essentially 2 more rooms, which has really worked out well. So we're doing well, and that's really helped us with education space. Music space, that was one of our goals. Updating the whole music room and music space. Often there's contention between the various groups' needs. So you'll have choir needs, you'll have bell needs, and they're often a little bit of moving things around to make it work in that same space. So one of the additional needs down the road would be some more dedicated space, particularly for bells. And then the other big piece that goes with that is music storage. So we purchased a lot of music for our different groups, and that takes up a lot of room. And we've talked about special file cabinets that are the kind that compact, but then of course you have to have support underneath it to really make sure it's held up. So that's one of those goals that we've talked about. That essentially becomes a lot of the renovation, which would be the next phase, which would be the education wing, because it also goes with number 7, renovating the education wing, the bathrooms. We did a little bit of work on the bathrooms this time where we took out the ceilings, made drop ceilings so we could get into the ceilings, which really has helped. But updating those bathrooms would be really appreciated by many. Right now they're okay, but there's a bunch of different things we'd like to do with that. And the addition of space, part of the original idea, we don't have plans on this, it was just ideas, was to add a wing off the end, which would get us 3 more rooms on each different floor. It would change that whole stairwell over there, which could maybe mimic the stairwell here. And but then you could add music, bell room on the end, you could add another Sunday school. And one of the other major goals was number 9, a nursery area relocation. Having the nursery in the very bottom of the church in the corner is not optimal. It would be nice if it was right on the same level as church. I think today we could have used that. I'm not going to say more about that, but I don't know about you. I was having a hard time getting through the prayers. I had my own prayers going on. Silence. So the having a nursery area that's on the same level as worship would be really nice. And I think it'd make a lot of parents feel much better, that they're closer to their kids. We've done some things to help with that, and I think cell phones help a lot with that nowadays. But that's something we'd like to do. The idea with that was the current music room would become the new nursery. And then you have to reposition the walls of that whole space and move it down. So essentially John's office and a little bit of the music room become the choir room. And then, these are all pie in the sky ideas. When you actually work it out, it'll all change. But having nursery on the same floor, having choir on the same floor, having a dedicated bell room, and then some more space. The other thing we did not do much with is the storage. We used to do a lot more, and this is something that we've changed quite a bit, and not necessarily because we've wanted to change, but Reformation has changed. We used to collect a ton of stuff every week for Reformation. I mean, I bet we took in about as much as Goodwill takes in, and we had people driving it down there constantly. Well, they used to have a huge basement that they sold everything on, and when they sold their building, they went down to a much smaller space. They reduced what they took in. it's been quite a bit less, and so there's been more encouragement to give to Goodwill and things like that. But that entrance in the education is still an issue, I would say, because of things like drop-off. How do you create a better drop-off space there? Maybe, I don't know if I'd go the whole route of covered, but at least an entrance that you walk right into as soon as you're dropped off, and so you're not getting rained on too much, things like that. But that whole discussion, how do you do that there? And then in general, storage is probably, besides parking, parking's always our number one problem. And I don't know, without adding a 3-story decker parking lot, which we will never do, and I'm sure TOSA would never let us do, especially after the Methodist experience. Storage is probably number 2 because we're very tight on storage, and so where do you put stuff is always a challenge. We're using every inch of this building, including all the attics, so which has really been a challenge because we have the drop down stairs, but you have to haul stuff up there. So it gives you a sense of the points that we came up with the renovation before we started. And we started going after some of these and how do we accomplish some of these. It took us 2 years to really work it out. We broke it into 3 phases. The first phase is all stuff I'm talking about today. Second phase is education wing and music and all the stuff I just mentioned. And then third was the adding offices off the side. Judy had a question?
Number 6, that was security.
Security. We did accomplish security. We did accomplish technology updates. So we did a lot with our security system. We made sure we had sensors throughout the building. We've done little things like one thing when you come in during the week, you'll notice that we keep these doors locked and shut at the top of the stairs now, with a sign at the bottom so people don't have to go up and try them, and but it forces people to walk past the office. A simple little thing, but it used to be you'd hear the door and it's like somebody came in the building. I never saw them. I don't know where they went. What are they doing? Where are they? We lock the 3rd floor now during the week, and probably through the most of the summer we keep it locked. So, so nobody can be doing any shenanigans up there. We by shenanigans I mean skateboarding and jumping off of ramps. That was an incident we had one time. We don't have to. We've talked about cameras, and that's something we're looking into. Yeah. That's one of those things. We haven't done much with it. We had some before. The problem with the cameras that we were using is, and this is a technology thing, it draws on your bandwidth that goes up. When you upload, it draws on your bandwidth. And so you almost have to, with each camera that's sending a signal up to the internet, it takes up a good chunk of your internet, which then affects our worship streaming. It affects other things that we do. So we've held off on that a little bit, but it's on our emergency procedures radar. I'll talk about emergency procedures a little later, but we have done work on security and technology. Technology was everything. These TVs, we used to have very little around the building. We have almost every room now has stuff that we can use. It also goes along with worship and video, and like right now, we're streaming this service, this class right now. And so, hi everybody at home. That's worked well for us as well. So a variety of technology things. We're always thinking about, well, what else could we be doing though? What else is out there? And then the question that goes with it is, and how much does it cost? So, because that stuff is not cheap. Does this help? Any questions on this list? But this was the goal. So our first, before we really launched our first campaign, we had received over that couple years from the last mortgage payoff, people said, well, I've given to a campaign beforehand. I gave to the mortgage. I had a building pledge. And people said, I'm just going to leave it as a building pledge and keep giving that same amount. I'm going to leave my pledge as is. And so with that, it really helped us to get seed money. So by the time we were ready to start, we had about $500,000 in the bank from people giving towards that. And that also, by the way, helps us also accomplish a couple other major things that came up. I forget exactly what they were, but as things came up and we're like, well, how are we going to pay for this $30,000 item? Churches are just like your home, except for much more expensive, right? When things happen like a roof, it's like, oh, great, $200,000 for a new roof, So it did help us with that seed money to really support things. And we'll talk about that now that we've completed our last campaign. So we accomplished the major thing there was HVAC. We did that without even taking out a loan because we had money in the bank, and we started to accomplish some of the things on our list, and then we moved towards that campaign. When we took on the campaign, we really started to do some of the other major projects. There's a whole list there that includes major things with the kitchen. We did sprinklers through the entire building, so all these little hockey pucks on the ceiling. We chose those because they look a little bit better than the nozzle that sticks down. But each one of those is a sprinkler head. It literally is covering every inch of this building, including every closet, including the spaces you will never see up in top. This, if I took off the ceiling tiles of this, you'd be amazed because this roof actually goes up about 40 feet above these tiles. It's a sloped roof. It's really high. They have sprinklers up there, just in case. Every space, every attic, there's a space that's hidden underneath stairs. They have to sprinkle those. So every inch is sprinkled. It's all within a sprinkler head. And that's on top of our fire system, which we also improved and upgraded that. And so the sensing that something's going wrong is already there before the sprinklers go off. And I always try to remind people, there's always this movie notion that comes from watching movies that if there's a fire, every sprinkler in the building goes off. You know, that's not how it works. Every sprinkler has a little bulb in it that has to melt and burst, and then that one head drops water. So you actually have to get it hot enough that it would burst, you know, or hit your elbow to it. So you never want to bump it because then water will come. So it's just that one area where it's hot enough that would happen. But we have the detection, and then we have the sprinklers, which is good. So that's been through that whole system. We also improved the electric to our building. We improved the gas system to our building. We actually put in electric that is ready now for the future. And one thing that was kind of interesting about that was, remember how we were hosting JOM, the meal ministry, Just One More Ministry, meal ministry, with Chris Capper. We had, forget how many it was, 7 commercial-sized freezers and refrigerators down by the youth room. That was, sucking up a ton of energy. When those came out, it dropped us down quite a bit. So we actually were beyond JOM with our electric needs. So we're fully ready for anything else we want to add, which is great. So we kind of positioned ourselves for the next 2 phases, which is really going to be helpful. So lots of different things we worked on, lighting and ceiling tiles. We also then, once we finished those campaigns, we came back and asked the congregation to do a small $90,000 section, which was to finish off the old kitchen, get it renovated into the workroom and the new conference room, and then update the main office. So we did that as kind of a follow-up. And then, just as a reminder, recently we in our 3-year campaign, this last 3-year campaign, we added the roof, we added the fire doors, we added some more with the fire system, and we added that video streaming at that point. We also did the fluorescent light bulb replacement system, where almost every fluorescent bulb has been converted to LED, which dropped us down. I think it drops us down, I always forget what it is. It's about a fifth? Drops us down about 60% of the usage. I'm sure there'll be another bulb that'll come in 10 more years that will drop us down another, and we'll switch that. But it was a 2-year payback. So even the cost of doing that paid itself back in 2 years. It just made perfect sense to do that. And there's a couple other large maintenance things, like we have to do the roof on the top of the tower over here. That's needing to be repaired. That's about a $6,000 cost. Those kind of things. The windows by the commons have some leak to them that we're trying to get handled. We kind of think they might be handled, but we're still watching them. Little things like that. So, is this where Rob, I think you're transitioning, or do you want me to keep going? I think Rob's. You want me to keep going? I'm going to let Rob jump in here. I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
Apparently, we're getting into a lot of numbers. I just really wanted to start out just thanking everyone again for the generosity, towards St. Matthew's. Absolutely outstanding. I'm a bit more of a block and tackling type of guy, and it's just amazing to see what we're able to accomplish with the renovation, the roof, the boilers, the sprinkler system. Those are all big, big ticket items that, as Chris really just mentioned, you don't see, but those are big dollar items. But overall, we had about a $2.8 million kind of construction improvement budget. As Chris mentioned, we had about $500,000 in the bank from residual or continuations of donations to the Building Improvement Fund over the years. Our first campaign was in 2013, brought in about $1.3 million. We started beginning the projects is in late 2014. We actually took out financing to support our improvement projects. We did get a loan through BMO Bank, BMO M&I, in September 2014. It was $850,000 financing note, and we completed our projects. From a financing perspective, we had a second 3-year campaign in May of 2016, which was really staged more as a pay off the debt and please help us tackle remaining projects in kind of part 1C and 1D of the campaign. So where are we today? And I think, I don't know if there's a slide on this or not. So, where are we today? So our current balance on the mortgage as of May 31st is $178,000. We do have about $55,000 cash on hand in our debt reduction fund. We keep those funds separate on our books of account, which puts us at a net balance currently as of today of about $123,000. We do continue to receive anywhere between about $15,000 and about $18,000 on a monthly basis toward debt reduction. At that pace, we are on track to be able to pay off the mortgage note by the end of the year. So I'm comfortable that if we continue to receive giving and pledges as we have over the next 7 months of the calendar year, that we will be able to pay off the balance of the mortgage. So really kind of what's next in terms of giving. So what we are encouraging members to do, the current pledge is expired May of this year. We are encouraging members to continue giving toward debt reduction as they have, to continue to pay down the balance of the mortgage. We're not actually going after new pledges. We're not looking for commitments. We're just asking for continued giving at current levels. And with that, we should be able to have the mortgage paid off by the end of the year. And with that, if there are any folks interested and able to consider a one-time gift, we would certainly entertain those. You don't talk to me, talk to Pastor Chris. But if there are folks that would like to make a one-time donation and really go a longer way to returning us to a debt-free status, we'd be happy to talk to you. Once the mortgage is paid off, again, I think we're looking toward the end of the year, November, maybe December, ultimately depending on giving and depending on, as Chris mentioned, there's a section of roof that needs to be done for about $6,000. If that all kind of factors into it. But we will be debt-free by the end of the year. Really then what happens? We would be encouraging members in a couple of different ways. One is to continue giving toward building improvements like we did probably going on about 10 years ago. And as Chris mentioned, why that's important is a lot of members, you just kind of build in giving toward building needs into their annual giving patterns. And that allows us to build seed money for future campaigns. It's absolutely fantastic when we can go into a $2.5 to $3 million building project and already have $500,000 in the bank. Makes it a lot easier for me to work with banks to obtain financing. And allows us to, gives us flexibility when we're negotiating construction costs because we don't have to wait on some aspects of the projects. Secondarily, we would be looking for folks to consider shifting some of their giving to the ministry fund, to our unified, to our general fund that supports all of the great things that we do at St. Matthew's, including worship and music, ministry, and things like utilities. And beyond that, just consider either moving dollars to benevolence or just other type of campaigns that come up throughout a given year. So that's really kind of an update on the financial component. I think we're going to turn to Pastor Chris.
Thanks, Rob. And a big thanks to Rob. Man, he really does a great job with keeping our numbers in line. And Bill Pinau was, and John Rohash were before him as our treasurers. And Gary used to say about John Rohash that he always had this ministry at heart feel. And I always feel that with Rob, too. He's got this sense of ministry, and it's not just about numbers. It's not just about trying to, keep things tight. It's about, well, what are we trying to accomplish in our ministry? And I really appreciate that about you, Rob. Thanks. And our whole finance team. We've got a great group that helps with that. One thing that we had on our list that we talked about as part of our last campaign was parking lot. And you'll remember that we talked about that. It's kind of a webbing look to the parking lot. If you look out the windows right now, or if you go on Google, if you really want a good view of the map view, you get a sense of how the parking lot is getting older. It's got a webbing to it. There's some unevenness to it, especially I feel bad in the areas where people walk in that are handicapped, that need to do a walker or things like that. It's got a little bit of unevenness to it. I was mindful of that yesterday as we brought one person in for the wedding, and I helped them come in, and it was kind of like, this has got some unevenness to it. That's not good. So we'd like to do that work, but we also recognize the more we talked about it, what do we want to do? Greg Strand from our architectural firm came out and met with us, and we looked at the whole thing, and it was like, what are we going to do? Because there's 10 levels to what you could do, and it really starts to, just like when you talk about renovating a building, talking about the parking lot adds all sorts of questions to it. Do you change your entrances? Do you, this wall that's out here, that's getting older. When you start to talk about walls and support, that's a whole different question. Do you start to look into rain gardens and things like that capture the rain? And so there's all sorts of levels to it. I think the wall was one of the biggest questions because if we made that wall taller, we could level the parking lot out a little bit more. It wouldn't be as sloped. But doing a new wall and raising it up obviously kicks up the cost another $100,000. And we really just started getting to the point where we said, okay, we could really go after this, which could be up to $400,000, or we could stop and say, you know what? Let's wait a little bit. Let's try to be prudent about this whole decision. And it probably ties in nicely with the education wing. When you're doing the education wing, you're looking at that entrance. You're going to look at this whole cement walkway that's right where you walk in, which I notice every time I walk in, it's got problems to it. It's got holes. It's got all sorts of things that definitely need to be replaced. But do we try to do it in a manner where, okay, we're going to have to look at this eyesore as we're walking into the building, unfortunately, for a while. But if we do it with the education wing, it makes more sense, and we can make it a unified plan that all goes together. And so we said, let's wait on this a little bit. Instead of just sending $100,000 to just get it fixed and then having to rip it all up later and waste the $100,000, it makes more sense to have a broader plan to the whole thing. So we want to give all of you an update on that because I know that was one of the pieces we were trying to get accomplished. And we thought it'd be about a $75,000 cost. And we could just go resurface it right now. We could do some of that work, and it'd be about $75,000. But like I said, there's a whole bunch of other questions that go with it. And one of the things we've even talked about is a second church electric sign out here on the corner, because that's addressing a whole different group of people that doesn't even see this sign. By the way, any comments on our sign? That was one of the other pieces we added to things. I didn't have it on the list, but big thanks to Sonia, who's constantly working on new signs, and I love how she's putting out timely signs. So, and you can time it. So the wedding couple yesterday was like, "Hey, that's us! You know, congratulations to Caitlin Van Lith and Zach." And today, as the graduates, I'm rushing there right after this. Once the graduates are coming in, it says congratulations to all our graduates. So, you know, it's timely. It's really cool that way. So I think it's been one of those things that we're able to communicate to the 9,000 cars that go past us every day. That's a great thing. So wanted to give you an update on the parking lot. That's we're kind of in a standstill on that, and it's going to be part of the next plan. So I think the next major piece to all of this is to start in about, and the question is, so when's the next renovation? That's always the other question. And you always want to take a break after you finish a campaign to be able to build in some seed money to start to work to that. We'll probably need about 2 years to plan and prepare and put together the drawings of what we want to do and really get a group together that thinks about that. That'll probably happen in, I'm going to take a break a little bit from this, but in about a year or two. I have a planning, and then we'll come back. So I'm guessing in about 5 years, we'll really be ready to kind of launch a whole nother building program. But we're going to take a little break for a while on that. Wanted to look at some other ministries besides just building stuff that we're working on, and one of the big ones that Sue Swing has really brought to St. Matthew's here and worked so hard to make it happen and be fantastic is Stephen Ministry. And so I wanted to call her up to share updates on that. So Sue. Yes.
Morning. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk about Stephen Ministry, and I want to first of all say thank you to the congregation, thank you to the council for believing in this and for supporting us. We love it. We just feel like we're in a great place with it, and I'm really excited to share a little bit more about it with you today. We are one of over 13,000 congregations in the world that have Stephen Ministry, so it's kind of tried and true. It's been proven that it works, and I think part of that is because it's I love this. It's super structured and organized. So there's just there's always a path, and there's always a resource, and there's always a way to approach things and to keep moving forward with the ministry. They've answered so many questions throughout these years of doing ministry with other congregations. So when we enrolled in 2016, we were enrolled as a Stephen Series congregation, and that just means that we have access for the lifetime of the ministry to all the resources at Stephen Ministry Central, which is in St. Louis. That's really helpful to us, constantly calling there and constantly getting ideas from them about how to move forward with the ministry. We completed Stephen Leader training in 2017, and so that's Pastor Ann, Ginny Kleppe, and myself, and began training Stephen ministers in 2017. They went through 40 hours of initial training and continue to receive training and education, but they began serving in February of 2018, immediately got busy. So we currently have I'll mention the other Stephen Leader in a second, but so 15 Stephen ministers were trained and commissioned in February and started to provide care. Everyone had a care receiver by June. So I think that speaks to the need for the ministry. And would you say block and tackle? Yeah, so this is kind of a 180 from that. This is touchy-feely, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason everybody goes through challenges in life, and we want to be there for the people of our congregation. We do have this incredible, well-equipped, beautiful building, and we do all kinds of outreach, but we want to make sure that we're taking care of people who need care. So this has been a great way to do that, and I think the congregation and community are speaking to us because we're busy, so we're happy about that. The fourth Stephen Leader is Carl Johnson, who just returned from Stephen Leader training about a month ago. Carl's a member of our church. He is still an engineer. He will be retired, fully retired, I think, by December. But he's been a Stephen minister for the past year and a half or 15 months, and he's decided to accept God's call to be part of Stephen ministry as a leader. And we look forward to that. It's he brings an interesting perspective, being a real quiet, engineering kind of guy. It's been good. Yeah, he's learned a lot from us. We've learned a lot from him. He's a great listener. So since we started Stephen Ministry 15 months ago, 24 people have already had a Stephen minister. And like I said, right away we got busy with that. The age range, sometimes people are wondering, well, you know, who signs up to get a Stephen minister? The age range anywhere from, we've had someone in her mid-20s to mid-80s. So literally that's the spectrum of people who are seeking care and support from Stephen Ministry. Loss and grief, life change, job loss, moving, decision-making. The reasons are endless to have a partner to walk with you through those challenges or those difficult times. So I don't think we could even say it's just one thing. It's whatever is causing someone to experience distress, causing them to struggle in their life, causing them to struggle in their relationship with God. That's where Stephen Ministry comes in. And so this means that our Stephen ministers have already provided over 600 hours of care in just 1 year. Happens primarily through one-on-one visits, some phone calls and texting, but the feature of this ministry, the thing they really stress is this is one-on-one, this is face-to-face, this is you with just one person week after week, having that person listen to you, affirm you, and just do whatever is needed so that you don't feel like you're alone. So our Stephen ministers, you wonder, well, what kind of training do they have to be able to do that? And when we talk about it, it's like, well, it's listening. We've obviously received training in all kinds of things like grief and divorce and boundary setting. I mean, there's just tons of things we've learned. But the main thing is how to listen and how to sit down and be one-on-one with that person for that hour and affirm them, ask questions in a non-threatening way, and just be a supportive presence. It sounds easy. It's really not. It's really not that easy to sit and listen one-on-one week after week for an hour or more. And so I'm just amazed at the dedication of our Stephen ministers. They are not paid. These are volunteers who not only provide that care to people, but they also come in for meetings twice a month and continue to receive education and peer supervision. And education includes visits from outside professionals. Lowell Tim has been a great resource for us. He's a member of our church, retired ELCA pastor and psychotherapist, so he comes in and helps us a lot with things like anxiety, depression. We've had speakers on grief share, we've had speakers on hospice, end-of-life issues, and some of the members of our church have come in and shared with us. And the coordinator of that is Ginny Kleppe. She's a Stephen leader who's also the coordinator of education, and she's a retired social worker with an incredible background and vast resources that have been super helpful to us as well. And so continuing education, peer supervision, continue for the life of the ministry. We will never stop meeting. And sometimes it's hard to come out on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock and meet for 2 hours. So we meet Tuesday nights and Thursday mornings, but everyone shows up. And that's because we've built a community, and that community is reaching out to the members of St. Matthew's and hopefully beyond. There's obviously plans to grow the ministry. In 2020, we will definitely do another training class for Stephen ministers and just hopefully keep going forward from there. And then just a little tidbit here. Everyone has access to this resource, unfortunately. For about 5 years, we have been reaching out with a resource called Journeying Through Grief. This is one of the Stephen Ministry resources that walks with a person on regular intervals during the first year after a loss. So you get a booklet on what you might be experiencing or how you might be dealing with the loss in your life at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and a year. And it's just kind of a helpful way for St. Matthew's to be reminding people that we're with them and to give them some information about things you might be experiencing or what it might feel like. So It's a real pleasure to do Stephen ministry here at St. Matthew's. We have an awesome congregation and community, but we are 100% sure that this is all God. God is in the middle of it. God is creating these partnerships between Stephen ministers and care receivers, and inspiring us to keep providing care. So thank you for your support and your ongoing prayers. And lastly, Pastor Ann, her role as a Stephen leader is the referral coordinator. So if you know anybody, or if you feel like you might want a Stephen minister, talk to her anytime. So, thanks.
Could you just mention confidentiality?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's huge. We don't, during our peer supervision, that's a time for the Stephen ministers to talk about what's going on in their caring relationships. That is not a time where we talk about details of the care receiver's life, where we give names or information that would betray their identity. It's 100% confidential. What we're concerned about is the quality of the relationship and the care that the Stephen minister is providing to the care receiver. It's called the caregiver and the care receiver. So confidentiality is completely honored. I don't think we've had one case where someone has said, oh, I know who that is, because we don't care. We're really not there to talk about the details of that person's life. We're there to make sure the Stephen minister is considering everything that they possibly can to provide the best possible care they can. Does that address it?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. It's important.
Any other questions people have for Sue? Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, big thanks to Sue. She has really headed this whole thing up, and all of our caregivers, Pastor Ann and Ginny Kleppe, really has done a lot of work, and it's been a wonderful thing to have here at St. Matthew's. So big thanks to everyone for that. Couple other things I was just thinking about things we wanted to share with the congregation, things coming up. One is St. Matthew's is now involved in what's kind of called a cohort of the Synod called Stewardship for All Seasons, which is really a visioning process. So we're a part of this. It'll be a 2-year process where we as leaders and people that are on our stewardship team, even on our council, we're going to have some conversations about this on council. Really, it's a visioning process, thinking about where are we going as a ministry, and how do we be good stewards and think about the stewardship process in our own lives. So not just about giving, but how do we serve? How do we care? How do we grow in ministry? So it's really a visioning process that I'm really excited about. We just literally started it about a week or two ago, and it's something that you'll probably be hearing more about as it goes. But just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on that, something that's we're excited about, and it could mean some real rethinking and revisioning about ministry and where we go. And we're always trying to think about how do we go after what God is calling us to grow, to do better, to be more efficient. I mean, all the ways that you can just really do things well. And we're always thinking about that. And I think this is really going to be a great process for us that the Synod is bringing to us. Another thing that we've been working on for the last couple months, it started right after, I forget when that was, Sue, but did an usher training, and kind of one of the questions became, well, what do you do with an active shooter situation? And we all kind of went, yeah, what do you do? And so we started talking about that, but then it really raised all the emergency procedure questions. So what do you do in a fire drill? What do you do with a tornado? What do you do with a heart attack? What do you do if someone's having a stroke? And the funny thing is, now that we've started talking about this, certain things have been happening. It's like, oh, geez, yeah, we've talked about this. Yeah. So, for example, if someone's having a heart attack, one of the first things you should do is, obviously, call 911. You don't ask the person, do you want me to call 911? Because they're like, I don't want to pay that bill. You're like, but you're having a heart attack. No, I can make it to the hospital. No, you call 911. And for example, when we talked with the medical professionals about that, because I was always under that impression, well, let them choose. Because right after we had this first conversation, someone fell in our parking lot, and they hurt their hip. Was it broken? I don't know. But they couldn't walk on it. And it was one of those kind of questions of like, what should we do? And they're like, it's freighted. It's right over here. I can get to my car. My wife will drive me. And it was like, okay, it's your choice. What we've learned now is you call 911. You always call 911. You don't ask. You just do it. Because what really happens with that is the ambulance are really attached to the ER. And so they're actually, one better way to say this is, you've now got a bed in the ER. If you walk in the door at the ER, they'll say, here's your form. Go sit down over there, if you can sit, and fill this out, and we'll get with you. You know, and they start it in a very slow way, the triaging that happens when you walk in. Versus, if you're in an ambulance, they take you right into a bed. If it's a heart attack, they take you right to the cath lab. You go immediately where you need to get the help. And so what we've realized is things like that, as we've had these conversations, you just call. The other thing you do is you send someone to the door to say, when they show up, let me walk you right to the person, versus having them wander the building going, where's the person that we need to help? And we found that out the hard way when our fire alarm went off by mistake. And the fire and ambulance people went to the Wauwatosa Avenue doors, and they're sitting there trying to get in, and we're over here going, I heard the sirens, I don't know where they went. So we're actually working with the fire department to say, this is where you just come across the street, you know? So all those little things that, as we've had the conversations, really help us to be better about all this. We just had our first active shooter training Thursday night. We had a police officer that trains these things in, and we had various leaders come in, council and staff, and we recorded it if you want to see it. But talking about what do you do in these situations, and I think we're going to have more of those trainings to really think about that. And one of the first things you do is understand where the exits are. And so that's why we wanted to have that in worship today, just to point out, think about where your exits are. That was the first thing, that was one of the main things we learned in that whole class, was know where your exits are. And that's in every building. And the officer talked about that in his own life. Every building he goes into, that's the first thing he thinks of. Okay, how am I getting out? Because he gave us examples. I forget the name of that club it was in Florida. Great White was the band, and the fire happened in the club, and nobody knew how to get out. And it was a fire, and I forget how many people were killed. Over 100 people killed. So I mean, knowing how to get out is one of the main things, and then obviously helping people do it in an orderly manner. So again, I put these up in worship earlier. Knowing where the exits are, we're actually going to have a pamphlet in the pews, so if you ever want to study it, and some helpful ideas. Right after this, Flash, our resident EMT, is helpful in that we've added more AED machines, defibrillators. And he's offered, if you want to, right after this, he'll take you and show you where they are. They're super easy to use. We hope we'll never have to use them. But they're the kind of things that save lives. So you know what they are? They're the device that when you open it up, it literally tells you, it talks to you. Okay, now do this, Chris. You know, and it's really simple, but it gives people a shock if their heart needs to be restarted. It's the kind of thing that saves lives. So we're also going to have a first aid training. You know, how to do those basic first aids. And things have changed with first aid. How do you do that emergency first aid? They're doing less of the breathing, the mouth to mouth, because everybody else freaks out about that. You know, I got to do that with someone. So they actually say just keep going with compressions, and but that's also a hard thing to do just by yourself. So having people swap in and out. So we're talking a lot about those kind of things. Joanne. So we've talked about setting up a first aid class for anyone that wants to come after worship someday. We don't have it set up yet, but that's one of our goals.
I'd like to go to that. I was
Yeah.
engaged for 10 years.
Yes, I know
I
you.
learned a lot
Yeah,
when I was engaged, so I know some of the things.
right,
I've been doing this I haven't been doing this now for quite a while.
right. We actually bought,
I'm interested in that type of
we actually bought, they're not, you know how the full dummies where you can practice on them.
That's what I did.
We actually have, it's just a bag, but it actually gives you the feel of how hard you have to do, which is actually really hard. You think you're hurting something, but they're like, no, you got to do hard. I got to keep moving because Daryl's got some good stuff for us. So anyway, we talked about the exits and understanding how to get in and out, and you're going to be hearing more and more from that group that's coming up. I want to call upon Darla, though, to finish us out here with our 100th anniversary coming up. Darla.
Thank you, Chris. Starting next year, we will be celebrating our 100th anniversary. Our actual 100th anniversary of the creation of the congregation is in May, and the dedication of the first church, I believe, is in October of the next year. So we're looking at kind of a year-long celebration. And we've come up with a title for it of Remember, Rejoice, Renew, and Re-envision. The 4 R's. No more reading, writing, arithmetic. Part of this has been appropriated from the bishop, too. He used it at Pastor Delaney's installation at her new church. So it was like, that's a good thing to do. So we're looking at putting this together for a year-long period. We're not going to cram it all into one week or 1 month or whatever. We're going to extend it out. And we're looking at probably doing a kickoff on Music Sunday of next year. But to get this all done, we need people to help. We need a steering committee to help put it all together. Steering committee will have some subcommittees, and if you're interested in any of these, please let us know. Of course, we have to have the historical committee, the one that talks about updates our 75th anniversary book, the one who starts putting together ideas for videos. Unfortunately, one of our ideas that we had been talking about for a long time was having Arbus Kretsch talk about what Sunday school was like when he was a little kid. And 2 days after a meeting, he passed away. So this one is very important. We need people to talk about their experiences here, our different ministries, and we have to have people who will help put together that content. Our communications team is taking care of all of the technical work with that, but we need content. Of course, we're going to do a fundraising. We're looking at some changes, some updating in the sanctuary, whether it's lighting or work in the bride's room, but there are some minor fundraising. The grand piano, we've been talking about the grand piano for years, and maybe putting that on the list for our 100th fundraising. We will have some events that we need to plan, whether they're adult ed. We are going to do a co-celebration with Cross, which will be celebrating its sesquicentennial next year. And they are looking at bringing in the speaker of Otis Moss III, who is he's the pastor at President Obama's church. So we're pretty excited about that, and Pastor Michelle has a direct contact with him. And then we will do our own internal celebration of the 100 years. We're looking for people to help us put guest speakers together, whether they're for preaching. Some of our past preachers may come back and talk to us. Inspirational and interfaith relationships. So we're looking at a variety of different things. And finally, we've got the visioning. We need to start looking at what we're going to be doing for the next 100 years, because we can't continue to do the same thing as we always have, as we know. And one of the things we've talked about is 100 years, 100 ways to serve. So if you're interested in the visioning portion of that, let us know. We'll begin meeting in July, and if you are interested in participating, you can contact any of the pastors, Chris, Matt, Ann. You can contact the office, you can contact me or anyone else on the council, and we will help put it together. Any questions?
So we do want to have it. Thank you, Darla. Appreciate Darla's really focus on this. I think it's going to be a great thing that we'll be able to celebrate our history and celebrate who we are as a ministry. Any questions people have about St. Matthew's or the things we've said today, or even things coming up? Yeah.
What about do not resuscitate bracelets when these people come?
Sure, yep. So there's a
Where I
lot,
live, almost everybody has one.
right. And we've got more questions on the emergency procedures than we have answers. But that's a great point. And we've got a couple of us in the room that can help me to remember that as we go. Yeah. Any other things people have? But like Rob said, like Sue said, like Darla said, big thank you to the congregation. You know, we are such a strong congregation, such a giving congregation, such a serving congregation, such a welcoming congregation, and all of that makes it a strong ministry that just is great potential for the future, and it's always amazing to look back at what we've accomplished. And so thank you for how you've been a part of that. So let's close with prayer, all right? The Lord be with you. Dear great and gracious God, thank you so much for so many things that have taken place here at St. Matthew's, whether it be the nuts and bolts that we talked about with building, or the ministry as we've cared for people. In so many ways, your Spirit has moved through this place and made it a strong, vibrant ministry. As we look to the next 100 years, we ask that you continue to bless us, continue to guide and lead us and empower us to really be a voice, a ministry, a service to our brothers and sisters throughout this world. We thank you for all that you do in our lives in this place, and we thank you for your love that continues to surround us and guide and lead us. And so we give you thanks and we lift up your name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. By the way, we have some Roman centurions that are guarding our parking lot. I don't know if you got that. Gretchen Housey had this idea as the graduation cars are trying to use our parking lot for worship. So don't be afraid if you see a centurion outside. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.